Welcome to ISLE. In this video, we'll cover how to use ISLE in labs and classroom settings and some tools and techniques that can help you use it effectively. Now, one of the first things you want to do is make sure that students are engaged in class discussions to make sure that they're learning the material and not just passively clicking through the content that you've prepared for them. One thing that can help to do this is when you introduce an activity, give a little bit of background on that activity and then ask them some discussion questions about it. So for example, if I'm doing a data analysis lab, I might have them read the description of the dataset, or I'll go over that description with them. And then when I've had a little bit of time to think about it, ask them some discussion questions. So for example, I might ask them, are there any issues in how the data was collected? What relationships might we expect to see between the variables in the data? Or what population could we generalize the results of an analysis to? And when they're all warmed up and ready to start thinking about the main body of questions, you can have them then go through those questions. And if it's a long lab, I would tend to break those up into chunks. So maybe chunks of 3 to 5 questions that the students can work on. And as they're going through, you'll have them, after every group of questions, discuss it either in small groups or as a class. And those discussions give you a chance to address any student misconceptions, talk about the student responses, and get them engaged again in thinking about the content and the material that you want them to learn. And you can do this in a kind of variety of different ways. You could have them work individually and then discuss in small groups, or you can have them work individually, discuss with a neighbor, and then discuss as a whole class. You can have them work in small groups and talk about it as they work. There's lots of different approaches that you can try, but the important point is getting them engaged in the material. And as they're working on these questions, I would circulate around the room, field any questions that the students have, either on ISLE or on the subject material, and also get a sense of what their understanding is on the content. And you can also look through the responses that the students have submitted as they're doing the questions, and that'll give you a sense of what the students' answers are, and also any misconceptions that they have, so that you have some talking points ready when you want to bring it back for a full class discussion. And the next section, we'll just have a look at how you actually look at those student answers in ISLE. To see student answers for a specific question, click the Answers button that's attached to that question. The number next to the word answers there is the number of answers that have been submitted, and the bar below helps track student progress, which we'll talk about in a bit. On the left, you can see all of the individual answers, and on the right, you can see a visual summary of these responses. If you want to see which students submitted each response, you can click that Show Extended button. Now, for privacy purposes, I won't show you the student names for this class, but if you're not showing the screen to students, you can click that button in your own class. Now, one thing you might need to do first is filter your student responses. If you have multiple cohorts or different lab sections, you may want to select just one cohort and display only those answers. You can also display the most recent by choosing only the last hour, or day, or week, etc. You can also filter student answers by searching, which is especially useful if you have text-based answers. Now, one thing to note with student responses is that by default, students can typically submit multiple answers. ISLE will display only the most recent answers for each student, indicated by the text below the graphic. To switch and instead see all answers for each student, click that text so that Include All Answers for any student is displayed instead. And finally, let's talk about the visualizations that you see here. For text-based questions, word clouds give you a sense of the common words in student responses. By clicking a word in the cloud, you can see all of the answers that contain that word. For numeric responses, a table shows the most common responses, while a histogram shows the distribution of responses. Looking at student responses can be a good way of figuring out what students' understandings and misconceptions are, but it can be hard to tell when students are just really lost on a topic because they might not even submit an answer to those questions. To try and figure this out, you can look at the student responses to those feedback buttons, where they have the chance to tell you if they're very confused on a topic, and they can give some specific details on their confusion. Now, to see student feedback, you click that responses button there. So far we've covered how to look at student answers and feedback. And the other thing that you'll want to do is track student progress to help time the activities as you go through the lab. To track progress on individual questions, you can look at the bar below the Answers button. The fraction that is blue represents the fraction of active users that have submitted an answer, and the fraction that is orange is the fraction of active users who are currently working on the question. You can also track student progress in the Instructor panel, which you open by clicking the orange arrow on the right of the screen. Now, when you open the Instructor panel, the green progress bar at the top shows the progress for the whole class in the lesson. Bars for individual questions will show progress for active users on those problems, while the time next to each question shows the average time at which users submitted the answer from the start of the lesson. So that wraps it up for our video on how to use IEL in labs and in class activities. For more information and tutorials, you can visit ieldocs.com.